The word school applies to a variety of educational organizations in the Middle Ages, including town, church, and monastery schools. During the late medieval period, students attending town schools were usually between the ages of 7 and 14. Instruction for boys in such schools ranged from the basics of literacy to more advanced instruction in the Latin language. Occasionally, these schools may also have taught rudimentary arithmetic or letter writing and other skills useful in business. Often instruction at various levels took place in the same schoolroom. Although there are more than 40,000 Chinese characters in written Chinese, many are rarely used. Studies have shown that full literacy in the Chinese language requires a knowledge of only between 3,000 and 4,000 characters. In China, 3 oral texts were used to teach children by rote memorization the written characters of their language. Even during the Middle Ages, education in India was imparted orally. Education was provided to the individuals free of cost. It was considered holy and honorable to do so. The ruling king did not provide any funds for education, but it was the people belonging to the Hindu religion who donated for the preservation of the Hindu education. In the 1950s, the Communist Party oversaw the rapid expansion of primary education throughout China. At the same time, it redesigned the primary school curriculum to emphasize the teaching of practical skills in an effort to improve the productivity of future workers. As more people became literate, they realized that most secondary education was only open to those who could afford it. Having created primary education, the major nations had to give further attention to secondary education by the time of World War I. It has been suggested that knowledge alone has little value, whereas knowing something in context is understanding, which has much higher relative value, but it has also been suggested that a state short of knowledge can be termed understanding. The current system of education, with its Western style and content, was introduced and founded by the British during the British Raj, following recommendations by the British officer, who advocated for the teaching of English in schools. Traditional structures were not recognised by the British government and have been on the decline since. Public education expenditures in the late 19th and early 20th centuries varied dramatically across regions, with the western and southern provinces spending 3 to 4 times as much as the eastern provinces. Much of the inter-regional differential was due to historical differences in land taxes, the major source of revenue. Education in New Zealand began with provision made by the provincial government, the missionary Christian churches, and private education. The first Act of Parliament for Education was passed in 1877 and sought to establish a standard for primary education. Even with knowledge, relevant distinctions or correct conclusion about similar cases may not be made, suggesting more information about the context would be required, which alludes to different degrees of understanding depending on the context. It was compulsory for children to attend school from the age of 6 until the age of 16 years. In Australia, compulsory education was enacted in the 1870s, and it was difficult to enforce. People found it hard to afford for school fees. Moreover, teachers felt that they did not get a high salary for what they did. The fastest expansion of primary schooling in the history of the Soviet Union coincided with the first five-year plan. The motivation behind this rapid expansion of primary education can largely be attributed to Stalin's interest in ensuring that everyone would have the skills and predisposition necessary to contribute to the state's industrialization and international supremacy goals. In the organization of a planned society in the Soviet Union, education is regarded as one of the chief resources and techniques for achieving social, economic, cultural, and scientific objectives in national interest. Tremendous responsibilities are therefore placed on Soviet schools, and comprehensive support is provided for them. Since the mid-20th century, societies around the globe have undergone an accelerating pace of change in economy and technology. Its effects on the workplace, and thus on the demands on the educational system preparing students for the workforce, have been significant. As major sources in influencing character and moral development, heredity, early childhood experience, modeling by important adults and older youth, peer influence, the general physical and social environment, the communications media, the teachings of schools and other institutions, and specific situations and roles that elicit corresponding behavior. Life skills are often taught in the domain of parenting, either indirectly through the observation and experience of the child, or directly with the purpose of teaching a specific skill. Parenting itself can be considered as a set of life skills which can be taught or comes natural to a person. One understands a piece of reasoning or an argument if one can consciously reproduce the information content conveyed by the message. One understands a language to the extent that one can reproduce the information content conveyed by a broad range of spoken utterances or written messages in that language. Self-kindness means to act in a generous and considerate manner when oneself is going through pain, struggles or hardships, as opposed to ignoring them or being self-criticizing. This is different from self-esteem, which is more of an evaluation of oneself, where self-kindness is more about how one treats themselves. Plato believed that the soul is divided into three parts of desire: rational, appetitive, or spirited. In order to have moral character, we must understand what contributes to our overall good and have our spirited and appetitive desires educated properly, so that they can agree with the guidance provided by the rational part of the soul. A biophysical environment is a biotic and abiotic surrounding of an organism or population, and consequently includes the factors that have an influence in their survival, development, and evolution. A biophysical environment can vary in scale from microscopic to global in extent. It can also be subdivided according to its attributes. Someone who has a more sophisticated understanding, more predictively accurate understanding, and an understanding that allows them to make explanations that others commonly judge to be better, of something, is said to understand that thing deeply. Conversely, someone who has a more limited understanding of a thing is said to have a shallow understanding. What is theorized by David Snowden is that the ability to return to a positive effect when going through a negative life event or stresses is what allows a person to be healthier and happier. It is about acknowledging the hardships and struggles in life and realizing that there is still room to grow and learn while experiencing these things.